You scroll through your phone and see a friend request from someone you have never met. Without thinking, you glance at their photo, their mutual friends, their job title. In less than 2 seconds, some part of you has already made a decision about whether this person feels safe. You do this dozens of times a day. New coworkers, new neighbors, new faces on a crowded train. And every single time, your brain quietly runs the same ancient calculation. But here is the strange part. That calculation was never built for this many people. Your brain was designed for a world where you would meet, at most, a few hundred faces in your entire life. Today, you pass that many before lunch. Think about your closest circle for a moment. The people you would call at 3 in the morning. The people whose problems feel like your own problems. How many names come to mind? For most people, the honest answer is somewhere between 5 and 15. Now think bigger. The people you know by name. The people you would recognize instantly and greet without hesitation. That number grows, but not infinitely. Eventually, it plateaus, somewhere most people never expect. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying primate brains and social groups. He noticed something curious. Across different species of primates, the size of the neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thought, correlated closely with the size of the social group that species could maintain. Bigger brain region, bigger circle of relationships that could be tracked at once. Smaller brain region, smaller circle. It was almost mathematical. When Dunbar applied this same ratio to the human brain, he arrived at a number that has since become famous. Somewhere around 150. Not a hard limit, not a rule carved in stone, but a rough ceiling on how many stable relationships one human mind can meaningfully sustain at the same time. Why 150? Because tracking a relationship is not simple. Your brain has to remember who someone is, what they have done for you, what you owe them, whether they can be trusted, how they behave under pressure. Multiply that by every person you interact with, and the cognitive cost adds up fast. For most of human history, 150 was more than enough. Archaeological evidence from hunter-gatherer societies shows that early human bands typically numbered in the dozens, sometimes reaching into the low hundreds during larger seasonal gatherings. Anthropologists studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania have observed similar patterns today. Small interconnected bands rarely exceeding this rough threshold. In that world, everyone you saw was someone you already knew, or someone connected to someone you knew. Strangers were rare. Dangerous, perhaps, but rare. Your brain never had to process a truly anonymous crowd, because anonymous crowds simply did not exist. Now pause and look at your actual life. You might work in an office with hundreds of employees. You might live in a city with millions of people. You might scroll through a social media feed containing thousands of faces, each one flashing past for less than a second. Your brain, still running its ancient 150-person operating system, was never built for this. So what happens when the ceiling gets crushed by the modern world? One answer is exhaustion. Have you ever left a party or a networking event feeling strangely, disproportionately drained? Not physically tired, but mentally foggy, like your brain has been lifting something heavy all night. That feeling has a name among psychologists: social fatigue. And it makes far more sense once you realize your brain is trying to evaluate dozens of unfamiliar people using cognitive machinery designed for a small, familiar village. Every stranger in that room represents a tiny, unresolved question. Can I trust them? Do they like me? Are they dangerous? Multiply that question by 50 new faces, and no wonder you come home wanting silence. Another answer is something more subtle: categorization. When the number of people around you exceeds what your brain can individually track, it does not simply give up. It adapts. It starts sorting people into groups instead of individuals. Co-workers become the sales team. Neighbors become the people on my street. Strangers on the internet become that kind of person. Psychologist Henry Tajfeld's research into social categorization in the 20th century demonstrated just how quickly and easily the human mind sorts people into groups, even using almost meaningless distinctions. Give people 2 arbitrary teams, and within minutes, favoritism toward their own team begins to appear. This is not necessarily a flaw, it is a shortcut. A way for an overloaded brain to keep functioning when it can no longer track every person as a unique individual. But shortcuts have costs. When you stop seeing a large group as individuals and start seeing them as a category, empathy tends to shrink along with the granularity. It becomes easier to dismiss that kind of person than it would be to dismiss someone whose name, face, and story you actually know. This is not a moral failing. It is a direct consequence of a brain trying to manage far more relationships than it evolved to handle. Consider something you have probably felt but never quite named: the strange emotional distance of a large crowd. Standing in a stadium of 40,000 people or scrolling past a video with 1 million views can feel oddly hollow, even though you are technically surrounded by or connected to an enormous number of humans. Some psychologists describe this as a kind of numbing. As the number of people involved grows past what your brain can personally process, each individual life within that number seems to matter less, not more. A single face is a person. A crowd is a statistic. Your brain did not choose this coldness deliberately. It is simply protecting itself from a math problem it was never designed to solve. Now think about your online life specifically, because this is where the mismatch becomes almost absurd. The average adult on social media may have hundreds, sometimes thousands, of friends or followers. Your brain, quietly in the background, still tries to apply its ancient 150-person framework to that number. It cannot succeed. So instead, it does something curious. It starts treating some online connections almost like real relationships, complete with jealousy, comparison, and emotional investment, even though the underlying cognitive system was never designed to hold that many people as individuals. This may explain why comparing yourself to a stranger's curated online life can feel so oddly personal, even when logically you know almost nothing real about them. Your ancient social brain does not fully understand the difference between someone in your actual village and someone in your phone. Here is a question worth sitting with. If your brain was built for 150 relationships and modern life quietly demands thousands, what parts of your exhaustion, irritability, or social anxiety might not be about you at all? What if some of it is simply the friction between an ancient nervous system and a world that grew too large, too fast for it to keep up? This does not mean modern connection is meaningless. It means something more interesting. It means the quality of a small, well-maintained circle of relationships may matter far more to your brain's sense of safety and belonging than the sheer quantity of people technically in your life. Anthropological and psychological research consistently points toward the same conclusion. Strong, stable, close relationships, even just a handful of them, correlate with better mental health, longer life, and greater resilience under stress. Meanwhile, having a large number of shallow, low-investment connections does far less for your well-being than most people assume, no matter how impressive that number looks on a screen. Your brain, in other words, is not upgrading itself for a world of millions of contacts. It is quietly, patiently, still trying to keep track of its village. So the next time you feel overwhelmed after a crowded event, the next time a stranger's opinion online cuts deeper than it logically should, the next time you feel a flicker of exhaustion just from being around too many unfamiliar faces, remember this: you are not failing to keep up with modern social life. You are a brain built for 150 people, quietly doing its best inside a world of 8 billion. And somewhere in that gap between your ancient wiring and your modern reality lies the real reason meaningful connection has always mattered more than the size of the crowd around you. You scroll through your phone and see a friend request from someone you have never met. This time, you pause. Not because the decision matters less than you thought, but because for the first time, you understand exactly why your brain is asking the question at all.